He can't see anything. Salt water in his face. Engine noise so loud he can't hear the man next to him. His stomach has been empty for hours. There was nothing left to lose after the first wave hit. He is 22 years old. He is holding a rifle he may never fire. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, past the spray and the smoke, there's a beach. He doesn't know how many men are on the other boats. He doesn't know what's waiting on that shore. He knows one thing. In a few seconds, the ramp drops, and whatever happens next, whatever he sees, whatever he does, nothing will ever be the same again. Not for him, not for the men beside him, not for the world. It is June 6th, 1944. The largest seaborne invasion in history is about to begin. And it starts here, in the dark, in the water, with one terrified soldier trying to remember how to breathe. To understand why June 6th happened, you need to go back 2 years. By 1942, the Soviet Union was bleeding out. Stalingrad, Kursk, Leningrad. Battle after battle on a scale the Western Allies could barely imagine. The Soviets weren't just fighting Germany. They were absorbing it. Millions of soldiers dead, entire cities reduced to rubble. And Stalin was furious. He had one demand, repeated at every meeting and every telegram to Churchill and Roosevelt. Open a second front, force Germany to split its attention. Stop letting the Red Army carry the entire war alone. Churchill stalled. Logistics weren't ready. An amphibious invasion of Western Europe wasn't something you improvised. But by 1944, the Allies had run out of excuses, and Stalin had run out of patience. Operation Overlord was the answer, and the scale of it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. The numbers: 156,000 soldiers crossing the Channel in a single day, 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, months of planning, thousands of moving parts, and one brutal problem the planners couldn't ignore. Germany knew an invasion was coming. They just didn't know where. The question of where: look at a map of the English Channel. The obvious crossing point is Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest stretch of water between England and France. Just 21 miles. Fast crossing, easy supply lines, direct route into Germany. The Germans knew this too. That's exactly why they had their heaviest defenses there. Rommel's best divisions. The most fortified stretch of coastline in occupied Europe. So, the Allies chose Normandy instead. A longer crossing, more difficult terrain, but far less expected. The problem? If Germany figured that out even a few days early, they could reposition their forces and turn the beaches into a slaughterhouse before the first soldier hit the sand. The Allies needed Germany not just to be uninformed, they needed Germany to be confidently wrong. Operation Fortitude. Enter Operation Fortitude, one of the most elaborate deception campaigns in military history. The Allies built an entire fake army. Literally. Inflatable tanks in the English countryside, dummy landing craft in the Thames, fake radio traffic, entire networks of fabricated communications designed to look like a massive force massing near Dover, pointed straight at Pas-de-Calais. And they needed a convincing commander for this ghost army, someone whose reputation was so large, so intimidating that the Germans would believe he was leading the real invasion. They chose George Patton. Patton was the general the Germans feared most. Aggressive, unpredictable, brilliant. If Patton was in command of a force near Dover, the Germans reasoned, that had to be the main thrust. It was too obvious not to be real. It wasn't real. Patton's army didn't exist, but the Germans believed it so completely that even after D-Day began in Normandy, Hitler held his panzer reserves back for weeks, convinced the Normandy landing was a feint, and that the real blow was still coming at Pas-de-Calais. That delay may have been the difference between a successful invasion and a catastrophe. Bridge to what's next. So, by the morning of June 6th, the Allies had the plan, the numbers, and crucially, the deception in place. What they didn't have was any guarantee it would work, because a plan only survives until it meets the enemy, and the enemy on those beaches was very much awake. Into the dark. While that soldier on the landing craft was still hours away from the beach, the invasion had already begun. At 0:15 on June 6th, American paratroopers started jumping into the darkness over Normandy. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, over 13,000 men, dropping behind enemy lines in the middle of the night, tasked with seizing key roads and bridges. Before the main assault hit the shore at dawn, the plan was precise. The execution was chaos. The scatter-strong winds and thick cloud cover shredded the formations. Pilots flying blind, anti-aircraft fire coming up from below, planes banking and weaving to avoid getting hit, and paratroopers jumping into all of it. Men landed miles from their drop zones. Some found themselves completely alone in hostile territory. No unit, no radio, no idea where they were. Others came down in the flooded fields the Germans had deliberately created. Low-lying areas Rommel had ordered inundated specifically to drown airborne troops, weighted down with 80 pounds of equipment. Some soldiers drowned in water that was barely knee-deep. They just couldn't get up. By dawn, entire companies were scattered across dozens of kilometers. Squads that were supposed to number 40 men assembled with 6. Officers tried to organize whoever they could find, their own soldiers, other units, strangers from different divisions, and moved toward the objective anyway. Strangely, the chaos helped. German commanders receiving reports of paratroopers landing everywhere couldn't figure out where the actual thrust was coming from. The confusion bought time. The man on the church tower, but of all the stories from that night, one stands out. Private John Steele of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment came down directly over the town square of Sainte-Mère-Église, a town that was already awake. A house was on fire and locals were out in the street trying to put it out under German guard. The square was lit up, and Steele drifted right into it. His parachute caught on the church steeple. He dangled there in full view of the Germans below, unable to cut himself free, wounded in the foot, watching his comrades get shot as they landed around him. He did the only thing he could do. He played dead, hanging from that steeple for over 2 hours, completely motionless while the battle moved around him. He survived. The Germans eventually took him prisoner, then lost him in the confusion of the day he escaped. Today, a dummy parachutist still hangs from that church tower in Sainte-Mère-Église, a permanent reminder of one man's very long night. The 10-minute bridge on every airborne operation that night ended in chaos. On the British and Canadian sector, a small glider force landed within meters of their target. Pegasus Bridge, a critical crossing over the Caen Canal. Their mission? Capture it before the Germans could blow it up. They took the bridge in under 10 minutes. It was one of the most precisely executed raids of the entire war. And it secured the left flank of the invasion before most of the world even knew D-Day had started. Bridge to what's next? By the time the sun began to rise over the channel, the airborne troops had done what they could, scattered, regrouped, improvised. Now it was the infantry's turn. 5 beaches, 5 different stories, and on at least one of them the plan was already falling apart. So that's where we are. The paratroopers are down. The deception held. And 156,000 men are closing in on 5 beaches in the dark. Part 2 picks up at first light. Oh, the landing craft hit the sand. The ramps drop, and we find out what was waiting for them on the other side. Omaha Beach alone will take everything we have, if you want to be there for it. Subscribe. It's the only way YouTube will actually show you part 2 when it drops. And if this video made you feel something, a like takes 2 seconds and it helps more than you'd think. One more thing. Drop a comment below. Tell me if you were on one of those landing craft on June 6, 1944. What's the one thing going through your head as that ramp drops? I read every single one. See you in part 2.